Thank you so much, Amanda. Hope you all had an amazing lunch. That was my first time having Spanakopita. I think that's what I called it. So yeah, welcome. As you've heard, my name's Steve Chen. I am the Executive Director of Coding Coffee and founder. I lead DevRel and community at this company called SIP AI, where we're building community AI. And before we hop into this stuff, I want to share with you a bit about my journey. So back in 2016, I was completely brand new to tech. I initially was a business major in college, dropped out of my senior year after working sort of part-time jobs, hourly customer service jobs, realized college is expensive. So I decided to drop out and essentially try to find myself. And during that time period, I saw those ads for these coding boot camps. Those ones that say, make 6-digit salary just by enrolling in this 3-month boot camp. So I did it. And after that entire time period, I realized, wow, I need to get involved in community to find my first job. So after doing that entire coding boot camp for 3 months, moved back to DC, got involved heavily in the DC tech scene, where I went to over 3 meetups per week. Became a developer through references, worked at a nonprofit unpaid software engineering internship, at first at this company called Kaboom, and then eventually worked my way up to one of the part-time hourly delivery jobs I worked at a company called Zoomer. It was basically Uber Eats before Uber Eats actually had Uber Eats, before DoorDash, all that stuff. So as you can imagine, high stress, high velocity stuff. And then at some point I landed at Grubhub after they acquired the company. So in 2017, I essentially started still going to 3 meetups per week, ended up working for this unicorn called Arcadia. I think they should IPO within the next year. And basically on day 3, I started DC Coding Coffee with a bunch of friends. It was a meetup where we basically hung out, drank coffee, and chatted about code. And from basically still going to 3 meetups per week, we did that up until 2020. As you can imagine, virtual meetups probably aren't the funnest meetups to go to. So in 2020, I decided to basically go on 3 hikes per week rather than 3 meetups per week. It was my first time hiking ever in my life. My parents didn't believe in hiking. So I went on 83 hikes in 1 year. Just all over the DC area. And then after doing that for a year, I was thinking, wow, I have not met a single person all year long. So in that time period, I was thinking, what can I do to make the most amount of impact possible to the most amount of people possible with the strengths I have? So essentially, I started coding coffee in New York. And still to this day, I still live in DC. So in 2021, I basically started driving up and down from DC to New York every 2 weeks for an entire year, basically 20, 26 maybe meetups over the course of 2021 to 2022. And this was only for a 3-hour meetup. So yeah, after just doing that for an entire year, that inspired 6 more chapters across the US, Columbus, Chicago, Austin. Some people that came to New York Coding Coffee got their first tech jobs and then were like, how do I start one in my local city? Then in 2023, we expanded to 25 more cities, so basically 5x, 4x, 6x. And then today we have over 35 meetups all across the US. Woo! So basically here's Spotify Wrapped of what happened over the past year in 2023. We basically kept going. We host over 368 events per year, roughly 1 per day annually. Of those events, 55 of them had talks. We default to social style. And then we also spend less than $6,000 a year total. Most of it is with software subscriptions. A lot of venues tend to have coffee because tech offices, they have coffee. And yeah, a lot of it was following these themes of growth, consistency, and very much that community-led, volunteer-led stuff we all love. And today, Coding Coffee, we are, essentially the mission is for a meetup group to make friends and grow. And 35 cities, 50,000 members, 200 plus volunteers. Of those 200, 40 of them are local chapter leaders. And our format is essentially social. And then we also host them monthly or bi-weekly. It depends on the chapter. And then over the course of these past 3 years, we've raised over $200,000 in scholarships, 2 career changers, as well as in this past month got a $25,000 cash grant to end loneliness among Gen Z. Woo! So before we hop into these 3 principles, let's understand the different types of communities. There's things like fan communities, neighborhood communities, HOAs, neighborhood pool clubs, apartments, just local based. Learning and growth communities, as you can imagine, universities, high schools, schools, and then social communities, meetups, user groups, basically where folks surround themselves with a specific passion that brings them together. So Coding Coffee itself is built on 3 core principles. These 3 principles I like to call the BTS framework, behind the scenes, or K-pop group. These are the core principles, these core principles are the framework I use when making decisions, making business deals, vetting sponsors, and basically how we lead at Coding Coffee. In these next 3 slides, I'm going to go over each principle in 1 slide, while also adding a couple of prescriptions of what we do at Coding Coffee to abide by that. Belonging is our first principle. Belonging is the feeling of being accepted and valued within a community. To foster a sense of belonging at Coding Coffee, we set defined boundaries. Boundaries determine who's allowed in and who's allowed out for the safety of the group. I sometimes like to joke that we allow anyone that has ever typed into an IDE. I know that might sound like we're excluding people that just don't type into an IDE every day, but read those words. Very much anyone that has typed into IDE ever. So anyone that's slightly curious about code, typically sales, marketing people, they're not typing into IDE ever. But at the same time, designers, product managers, they might. And then another prescription that we have with Coding Coffee is we encourage contributions from our community, whether it's through volunteering, community-led talks, developing open source projects like our Discord bot that separates all our cities so you don't get annoying messages. And then surprisingly, most of our organizers have also been inbound volunteers who've attended a Coding Coffee in their local city or just heard about us through word of mouth. And then we spend basically $0 on marketing. And then to also facilitate belonging, we have our core signature of Coding Coffee, intro circles. These are essentially a community ritual that we host at every Coding Coffee. It's sort of what makes Coding Coffee unique, but at the same time, you've probably heard of them. They're basically icebreakers. And essentially how it works is, at Coding Coffee, it's a 3-hour meetup. We come in at 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m., we have an intro circle. We force basically everyone that has come in to stand in a circle, say their name, what they're working on, and what they can help out with. And this way, this organically creates a natural interest for one another. It helps people feel seen and feel heard. And that's honestly really big to someone like me who's literally never been in tech, have been going to all these meetups and realize, wow, these people have decades of experience compared to me. And at the same time, probably we're not talking about the same thing. Our second principle is trust. Trust is defined as building reliability and integrity in relationships through consistency. At Coding Coffee, I set organizer expectations of regular, frequent events. Typically, this means either 2 weeks or monthly, never quarterly. When people ask when the next meet, they're ecstatic. They already know that we're gonna host an event either 2 weeks or 1 month from now. And then another way we build trust is we create multiple feedback channels. We listen and implement suggestions. We have multiple channels from meetup.com where Meetup automatically sends out a mailer or a form to every attendee of the event. This might be new, but I'm not sure. And attendees can basically fill out any feedback that they have. Additionally, we also have organizer office hours. I basically host a 30-minute office hour ever since we started Coding Coffee every Monday night for 30 minutes. No one comes usually, but at the same time, it is very much to help answer any questions, blockers, and basically, help any struggling organizers. And then the last way we also help create feedback loops is through Discord. We have an online Discord community. I'm on it 24/7. Anyone within our 50,000 developer meetup can basically ping me and say, hey, I had a terrible time at this meetup, or I had a great time at this meetup. Choice is yours. And this way we get visibility into what the community wants. Another way we build trust is to ensure consistency on the long-term vision of Code and Copy, or essentially alignment across all Code and Copy levels. So in 2022, we actually had only 6 to 7 chapters, and of those 6 to 7 chapters, we had the leads hop into these weekly workshops with our learning and development instructor, who happens to volunteer at Code and Copy in Baltimore, who also happens to have a degree in neuroscience at Yale. So he's just really smart at just facilitating, helping big tech companies align, and he just did it for free for us for an entire month. So me and 7 chapter leads basically, over the course of 3 weeks, came out of those 3 weeks with 3 paragraphs, a bulleted list, and the values that represent us as a meetup. So you'll get similar quality wherever you are when you attend a Code and Copy. This was big for us, mainly because sort of writing copy text, or honestly, I guess in this room, if you've ever written an email, it takes time, and a lot of times it's not as, you don't get the meaning across. So very much ensuring that consistency really helps build trust. And the last principle, safety. Safety is the feeling of being secure in an environment for all members. I'm not talking about physical safety, because if it's physical safety, you probably don't want to be involved in a community that is physically endangering you. This is more so psychological and social safety. At Code and Copy, we enforce a code of conduct with clear guidelines. The contributor covenant that I have over here, fully open source, a great way to establish those guidelines, but at the same time, if you don't enforce those guidelines, what's the point? At Code and Copy, we have pretty much a no warnings rule. With this type of stuff, we very much investigate everything swiftly, but also try to have at least bias out of it. There's a sort of former school principal turned product manager counterpart of me that completely different gender, completely different age, race, background. So it definitely helps sort of relieve those biases when investigating safety concerns. Another way we help build safety is we choose accessible venues near public transit for obvious reasons, but we also choose venues that encourage interactions. I like to joke that, office spaces, they've sort of gone toward the more open office route. Not great for work, but they're amazing for meetups. People naturally want to talk to each other, they see each other, interactions take place, and things work. And then what's unique to Code and Copy is that we're sort of social style by default. We don't do talk-focused events, mainly for the fact that you've probably been in talks that are 30 minutes to 45 minutes long. You sit down, you look at your phone, and then you're like, oh wow, what are they talking about? But then you're in the center of the room, so you want to get up and leave in front of everyone. It's rude, but at the same time, it's, we've all felt that way at some point in our tech career. And then these are basically the 3 principles summarized with all the prescriptions. I think there'll be a recording after this, so don't feel that you need to take a picture. And when I think of meetups, I think of 2 very distinct buckets of meetup. There's community-led groups, and then there's company-led groups. Community-led groups are focused more so on the group goals or individual local goals. There's typically a lot less structure. There's no t-shirts that are branded in them. They're grassroots, very much bottom-up, volunteer-driven, and have a lot less resources. Company-led ones, they're focused on business objectives, as you can imagine. More structured, typically a talk-focused. They usually will have a lot more organizers, people on staff with lovely t-shirts, top-down, and very much a lot more resources. So think in your mind which one is better. But before we do that, you might be asking yourself, as a company-led DevRel, what can I do to make meetups happen? I mean, sure, you can start a meetup on your company dime, but as you can imagine, it's very hard to keep that company-led meetup afloat. Executives want return on investment, and you might not want to find a speaker every time, especially on a monthly basis. That's 12 speakers a year, or if you're doing it bi-weekly, 24 speakers a year, and it's very hard. And chances are, we as tech workers will be gone from the company within 2 years, so it's not usually meetups for companies don't work out. So the true power of meetups is to build partnerships with your community-led groups, whether that's through either providing venues, resources. A lot of times, Coding Coffee, I sit down with our sponsors, chat about their goals, and see how we can help align toward those goals. This results in shared goals both parties can gain value from, and from sponsorships, Coding Coffee is simply able to have a meetup that meets up every 2 weeks. That's pretty insane. Of course, we also always look for venues. Venues, I think, with meetups are always the hardest thing to find, especially if you run a weekend meetup. A lot of venue offices just aren't open without a fee. And then, yeah, also no one's using the office on weekends. Then you can also help leverage resources like coffee, scholarships, or swag. Some things that might cost money to other individuals might not cost as much money to companies. And then many meetups are honestly okay with being a walking billboard half the time. And a lot of times they might be cheaper than you would expect to sponsor a meetup. As a meetup leader, this results in what I call resilience and sustainability. I like to view those two as sort of the pillars of success with meetups. Resilience is essentially just adapting to be able to handle setbacks. As you can imagine, there's always last-minute setbacks with any event that you do. And sustainability is essentially the ability to keep the meetup alive. This involves a relentless level of consistency. And through partnerships, this equals enhanced collaboration, where there's stronger public-private partnerships for success of both the company and the localized meetup group. And before we end this talk, I want to sort of quickly bring your attention to this report. This report is by the US Surgeon General back in 2023, last year. 87-page report on the loneliness epidemic among Americans. It basically said that we're spending less and less time together. Engagement has decreased even within households, and this was only data leading up to 2020, not anything after that. As you can imagine, short-form content algorithms definitely not helping out at all. And you're wondering why I'm showing you this. Well, social connection also really affects health mortality rates, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, mental function, obviously in the negative, and even increases rates of self-harm. There's also the educational and economic benefits of simply being socially connected. Me personally, I found almost every job I've ever worked in through community. And if I didn't have community, I wouldn't be in dev or DevRel. So we need meetups now. We need human connection because we as humans naturally have the psychological desire to feel like we belong in a community and a group. We're spending too much time on our screen, of course, and missing out on possibly even connecting with others. And community will help us live longer, think better, and be better overall, personally and professionally. So remember these key takeaways. When building meetups, build on belonging, safety, and trust as the guiding principles. Start partnerships locally to go further together, and strive for partnerships that focus on the sustainability and resilience. And then last but not least, focus on the true meaning of meetup. Create a space for social connection, create a space for developers to grow and make friends. Thank you. I have some time for questions.
Absolutely, yeah, awesome. That's what I'm coming to do.
Yeah.
I see one right back.
Jamie.
You mentioned social default. Can you expand on that a little bit? How you're kind of working that into like year-round?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the slides I mentioned, that prescription of social by default, I think there might be a better phrasing for this. Basically, you probably have been to tech meetups where they're all, talks and not really much networking a lot of times. Typically the networking is either like 30 minutes in the beginning or 30 minutes at the end. But in reality, 30 minutes is not a lot of time. There's like not enough time to socialize and actually make connections. So Coding Coffee itself, we're a 3-hour social-a-thon, I guess. It's very social focused, not necessarily talk focused. Some chapters with Coding Coffee, we have these things called optional talks, where we have the talks in a completely separate room, just so people don't feel like they have to just listen to someone speak for a couple hours to socialize.
More questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great talk, and also I just think you're doing really great work because the loneliness and everything is pretty clear after the pandemic. So get everyone with that. I just wanted to ask about venues and how you develop relationships with venues. And in my experience in New York, there were a lot of meetups in Manhattan, and they're still maybe some are coming back, but it's not what it used to be. And is there like thinking outside the box you can do with finding venues or looking at other kinds of organizations or businesses?
Yeah, I have just the data. Basically, I think the best way to look at venues is to look at struggling industries. For-profit coding boot camps, struggling. Co-working spaces, also struggling. But then, of course, there's always tech offices. I think a lot of companies with the return to office, just hasn't worked over the past couple of years. Look into those 3 categories, and if you can't find any from that, just tap into your network. I think usually it is just me Google Mapsing a random city and typing in co-working, and then just cold emails. I think the shorter, simpler, the better. And it is very much that, just sort of aligning, again, those shared goals with whatever goals they're trying to do, whether it's brand awareness or just sales at the time.
Hey there, I have a question, and then I also have a suggestion to put out to the group because I thought it was a really cool way of doing things. But my question is, so I run an outdoor meetup for women in tech.
Awesome.
That we do during the spring and summer in Nashville, Tennessee, and then Nashville actually just lost their last women in tech group when Girls in Tech shut down, and so me and my friend are trying to start up a new Girls in Tech. And my question is, my strategy for my little outdoor meetup has been piggybacking off of people who have bigger meetups and partnering with them. But now that we're doing our own Girls in Tech group, how do you get the word out to people when you have a new meetup? Is it just you just put on meetup.com or word of mouth?
Yeah, well, for Coding Coffee uniquely, it has been almost 98 to almost 99% meetup.com. It surprisingly still is, unfortunately, the best event posting platform for communities in general, because there are 20 million to hundreds of millions of users already on that. But then at the same time, what you mentioned, piggybacking off of other larger audiences, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, all that stuff, but then also various sort of social groups, right? You're probably part of a couple that wouldn't even mind cross-collaborating, cross-promoting. And I was just chatting with Justin, who's just taking pictures about this, of cross-collaborating with other meetup groups as well, where, just figure out if you can even host an event at the same time, at the same place, and just brand it as that. It is a lot of cross promotion.
Okay,
and I know Nashville is also a lower population tech area, so it is very hard. I get
We
you.
have a surprising amount of engineers there, but it is kind of
we have one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so we're making things happen.
We might have had a non-affiliated Coding Coffee at one point, so now I'm I gotta let everybody know that there's an official Coding Coffee.
We're actively trying to unite basically all of them. There's one's called Coffee and Code. It's the best. That's one of the things, once we stop growing, I am actively trying to do. We basically, in the DC area, never really we have maybe 8 chapters across DC, Maryland, and Virginia, 3 states. None of them talk to each other. It was bonkers. It wasn't until 2020, I think 2021, 2022, when we all basically got on Discord and we're all right, we'll share ideas, I guess. Just developer things.
Well, I did want to give a suggestion to y'all. One of the best like meetups that I went to that was like kind of a talk was a Women in Tech meetup that is no longer around in Nashville. But what they did was that they had a couple of speakers and they had tables. And you could pick which speaker you wanted to, and you could pick two, like they would split in half. And so you'd go, and so you'd be talking to somebody about their topic, and they'd be presenting it to you, but then you'd only be with a small group of people, or women, and then you got to talk more about it, and then afterwards they'd go to the table, and like somebody from that table would give like a wrap up and like tell the rest of the group what they talked about. But then you actually you got the information, but you made actual connections, so it was much more meaningful. So just take that if you really want it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I saw a few more hands. We have time for one or two more. Yes, Jim.
Hey, thanks for the talk. It was great. I'm curious, like, I'm not sure how I'm going to phrase this actually, but if you're a company kind of wanting to leverage that like grassroots feel of a community meetup, but you don't yet have a series that has been built by your community.
Right.
But you also want to hold on to some of that brand control ever so slightly. I know that's the eternal challenge. I just wonder, like, would you recommend more sponsoring existing communities like Coffee and Code or, so I got it the wrong way.
Oh, no.
Sorry. It's been on purpose, right? Yeah. Or what are your suggestions basically for how companies can approach that?
I definitely do think sort of starting off, partnering up with local community-led communities is by far the way to go. Like simply just having that meetup name by your company if they're okay with that. Surprisingly, a lot of meetups very much are okay with it. So very much, just have a conversation with them, see what they're comfortable with, and just go from there. Mind me asking, where are you located or where they're trying to do things?
That's a great question. I'm in New York, but the company is HubSpot in Boston, but we're figuring
Boston Karen Coffee, second biggest chapter.
Sorry.
And I think we have one more question.
Thank you. So I am the community manager for HashiCorp. So this talk really sets me off, right? Like I can't even keep still. So I would say we're company led, but we're very community first, right?
Yeah.
So like everything about HashiCorp is really community. So one thing that I wanted to offer this group is, we're always I work in a team with at least 6 developer advocates. We have so many people who travel and who are willing to give talks and who are, we're a remote first company. We have user groups in almost 65 countries, like almost 200 user groups. So if you all are looking for speakers, I would love to network with any of you who are looking for speakers. We can do someone who is within HashiCorp. We have HashiCorp ambassadors. We have, we call ourselves hugs, right? HashiCorp user groups. So everyone needs a hug. So we have co-organizers, and I just wanted to offer that to you all because I love everything community.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And definitely feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Steve Chen, Sift, Good Coffee. Super down to connect with any of you, have a coffee chat after this entire conference, and chat more about community. There's nothing I love doing more.
Amazing. Another round of applause for Steve.